Okay.
Hello all of the colleagues. You're all welcome. I just want to say hi.
Hi, hocam. I think everybody's here. We can start, right? Okay then. Dear professors, dear guests, welcome to our third Communication and Technology Congress, first session. Our Communication Ecology thematized Congress, first session topic is Digitalization, Communication and Society. We are very pleased to host you here at İstanbul University webinar system. First of all, I would like to inform you about the rules for your presentations. Your presentations should be finished in 10 or 12 minutes. An extra 5 minutes will be given for the question part at the end of our session. I will remind you if you overrun the time. Please follow the rules so that we can complete our program on time and everybody has enough time to talk and answer questions. Thank you again for your contributions. Now let's start with our first presentation. First speaker from French Anatolian Institute, Assistant Prof. Dr. Begüm Burak, with her work, Social Media as a Public Space for Political Activism, the Use of Twitter During Gezi Park Protests. Yes, dear Professor.
Thank you, dear Chair. I will share my screen, but yes, I had tried it. Just a moment. Okay, share it. So you can see my screen right now. Okay. This is the title of my presentation. Also, it is, I am looking at the clock. I will try to use the time efficiently. This is my presentation. The title, as you said, is Social Media as a Public Space for Political Activism, the Use of Twitter During Gezi Park Protests. First of all, I want to address some of the important points of my abstract, but I'm not going to cover all of the slides. Maybe the time will be not enough for this. Just a moment, okay. In recent years, we know that polarization has been visible in Turkey, not only in offline platforms, but also throughout the social media platforms like Twitter or Facebook. We sometimes witness polarized movements or polarization. And in my study, I used to analyze the use of Twitter during Gezi Park movement and how the polarization has been witnessed in social media. I used the concept of mediated populism coined by Sharakvatri and Roy in 2015 as a theoretical framework. In the following slides, I'm going to try to cover this theoretical framework. And basically, I can say that this notion says the crisis was seen in Gezi movement, and the data that will be under analysis is the top mentioned. So I will try to say how I chose this data and what I saw at the end of my presentation. So also I saw some of the words that were that were often mentioned in the tweets posted during the top of the during the peak of the moment, let's say. My keywords are Twitter content analysis is my methodology, mediated populism is my theoretical framework, and Gezi protests. As part of my introduction, I can say that social media platforms have been increasingly utilized in protest movements. So far, you can all hear me, dear Chair.
Yes, we can. Yes, Hocam. You can continue.
Okay. So social media, thank you. Social media platforms have been increasingly utilized in protest movements, and during times of crisis and polarization also these types of channels have been very important. So the purpose of the study, as part of my introduction, my purpose was to analyze the use of Twitter, as I said, in a time span that I chose. I use mediated populism, and this study argues that social media has paved the way for the emergence of a citizen-centered public space during Gezi protests, which was also a good place to show the protesters' level of discontent during the tourist government. The data that were used were consisting of the tweets posted during May 25 and June 16, 2013. This was the time span that I chose as the peak time of the protests. And I used, as I said, the content analysis methodology. So I would also like to cover, we all know what Twitter is, but I would also try to mention a few words about what Twitter is. Twitter can be seen as a microblogging site. It provides 140 character long postings. I think this has changed, but this is not a relevant information. Sorry about this. Twitter is a platform that can facilitate a major increase in social interaction. Twitter offers the advantage of simplicity. It is also free and open to anyone. So it's a very good communication and networking tool for all of the people all around the world during both times of crisis or other activities related to arts or politics or other issues. Another important concept that I must address is polarization. According to Jones, polarization can be defined as one of the important themes in the core of discussions of Turkish politics in the last decades. It can be said that polarization is associated with increased levels of gridlock. I must be very quick. Polarization also can be defined as, as separating partisan movements. Also, it is related with the level of dislike that people feel towards each other from other parties. The use of Twitter as a public space for protest during times of polarization. Twitter can be used as a tool of online mobilization and social activism. It can serve as a public space through which collective action can be managed by empowering citizens to diffuse ideas. Twitter can also serve to organize protests in an efficient way. Also, I must say that here are some of the relevant research scholars about this issue. For example, Groots and Royce argue that social media also is responsible for making people more polarized. During the protest, we also witnessed that. And also traditional media, the TV or the mainstream newspapers ignored the events. And so social media was a good a platform for the protesters to show their discontent or problem with the ongoing developments. An important data here, but it's not a very new data. Turkey is among the countries with the highest penetration rate of Twitter, almost more than 300% of people use Twitter in Turkey. Also, during Gezi Park protests, the official report of Ministry of Interior states that approximately more than 3.5 million activists participated in protests in around 80 cities, and they also here I gave the number of the Twitter users and their hashtags. I want to make a reference to President Erdogan about Twitter. Erdogan says that Twitter is the worst menace to society. He noted that the best examples of lies can be found there. It's a reference I took from another research. Also, I don't want to talk about Gezi Park movement because I think I have 5 minutes. So in brief, I can say that we all know what Gezi Park is. Gezi Park movement began as an reaction against the government's renovation plan, and it first started as a peaceful protest. This is the important thing I should address, I think. Much of the literature on Gezi protests has been shaped by two understandings: the views from a conservative nationalist or a pro-AKP point of view define Gezi as a Kemalist uprising, an alternative account is presented by scholars such as Nilüfer Göle, who argue that Gezi represents the Turkish variant of an emergent global anti-capitalist social movement which challenges the neoliberal economic order. So these are two important while analyzing Gezi Park movements. Some people say that it's not just against the tree cutting, or it's just like a social discontent against the government. I think I must not miss, yes, this is my theoretical framework. It is the mediated populism. I can briefly say that mediated populism means that the outcome of the close connection between media-originated dynamics and the rise of populist movements. Mediated populism takes different shapes depending on the stage of development of the populist phenomena. These are the four-stage cycle. These are, so I think that, is there a problem here?
No, you can continue, hocam. We're here. No problem.
Because it says recording stopped. I thought that I get disconnected. Okay, mediated populism has a four-stage cycle, but I don't want to tell these details because I have limited time. So I want to read this. According to Mazzolini and Braciglia, mediated populism shows us the highly personalized kind of communication of populist leaders. Social media also contributes this, and this is a quote from these scholars. Here, what I said, took from Berelson according to content analysis methodology. It's a systematically and objectively identification of the characteristics of messages or contents in a news article or other data. So an important insight is this: only about 30% of people during the Arab Spring used Twitter in Egypt, but in Turkey, so we can say that the Turkish people posted during Gezi protests, but sometimes they make a comparison. But in the Egyptian case, just 30% of the people were the local people who posted the tweets. So these are, you can see the number of tweets, like police, Gezi, Tayyip is the name of the president. Gezi Parkı, Beşiktaş, a district in Istanbul. Toma, vehicle used by the police. Çapulcu, Erdogan used this word as meaning looter. Pepper gas. Çarşı, fan group of Beşiktaş Football Club, and RTE, the initials of the president's name. These were the number of the tweets and the person, I mean, like around millions of tweets were posted during this time. The analysis, I can say that these are the words, as you can say. Also, this is a preliminary study, so I think that I will, of course, try to improve this. It shows that there's a heavy discontent against the government. The mainstream mass media ignored the protests, so the Twitter platform was used as a public space for political activism. The protests were also supported by online protests, we can say. This reveals that polarization was evident on Twitter. And my final words. Yes, what I attempted to address, analyze the use of Twitter as a space for political activism. And in brief, I can say that Twitter was used as a public space to show this content because the mainstream media couldn't, sorry, I try to also stop sharing my screen, so I'm trying to find it. Okay, it is there. So couldn't, what I would say. So the mainstream media couldn't represent the events. Thank you, dear chair, for this opportunity.
Thank you, dear professor. Okay, I want to thank you, Assistant Prof. Dr. Begüm Burak, for her study on behalf of our committee.
Thank you so much.
Questions will be asked at the end of the session, please. Now, our second speaker, Assistant Prof. Dr. Babatunde Ojebui, sorry for the pronunciation if it is wrong, from Ibadan University,
Good afternoon, everyone.
Nigeria,
good morning.
with his work.
Yeah.
Between coronavirus and COVID-19, influence of Nigerian newspapers headline, construction on audience information, seeking behavior. Yes, dear professor, you have 10 or 12 minutes.
Okay, thank you very much. I want to share my screen. Can I share, please?
Yes, of course.
Can I share my screen?
Yes, you can.
Okay, thank you. Okay, can you see my screen?
Yes.
Hello, can you see my screen?
Yes, we
Okay,
can
good
see.
afternoon, everyone.
Could you please open your camera?
Yeah, the topic of the paper to be.
Dear Professor, could you please open your camera?
Okay, want to see my face?
Yes, of course.
Okay,
Because
let me do that.
On
Let me
YouTube,
try to
the
look
live.
for the camera.
If it is possible, of course.
I want to see the full. Sorry, I want to. Let me stop sharing and move to. Okay, I want to.
That's okay. We can see you now.
Can you see me now?
Yes. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Yes. The topic of my paper is between coronavirus and COVID-19, influence of Nigerian newspapers headline construction on audience information seeking behavior. That is the title of the paper I'm presenting on behalf of the other authors. I want to start by taking us through the background, that is the rationale for this paper. Why do we embark on this? Why is it important to do? So first of all, I'm starting by taking us through the historical perspective on COVID-19. When it started in 2019, December, it was named by the scientists as 2009 nCoV, standing for novel coronavirus. That is the name it was given then. Thereafter, in 2020, World Health Organization officially tagged it as COVID-19. They used the word COVID in a way that will make it look a bit less violent, less serious, so that people will not see it as a kind of stigmatization, discrimination, or something that could cause public panic. This is what we call risk management reporting or strategies in communication, when the media or the people try to mitigate the severity of certain diseases. So this is what WHO did by naming it COVID-19, to make sure that there was no racial discrimination, no name of any place as the origin of the virus. Now, background continue. The media and the media attention and adoption of names. Media has the power to use the names they give to certain element or entity to make sure that people get attention from the media. So the name that the media gives to a certain entity is likely to be the name that people will call it. So this is exactly what we try to do here. That naming of pandemic by scientists and the WHO drew attention of the media, and the media in their own efforts too. They use those words that the scientists have used to name the disease. Then the journalists, they don't use just only one. They use different names, such as coronavirus, 2019 nCoV, new coronavirus, and COVID-19 to tag the virus. So when they did this, the media all over the world started to use those names. In Nigeria too, the media houses used those names, but predominantly, Nigerian media used coronavirus and COVID-19 in their headlines to draw people's attention, to draw the attention of the audience to the virus. Doing this, make people to be aware of the disease, the characteristics of the disease, the severity, and so on and so forth, the preventive measures. And the pervasiveness of the social media also helped the conventional media to do this. Social media also use all these names as are used in the mainstream media. So people became aware of the virus, and it became what people always talked about. However, what's the gap that we want to look at in this study? There have been a lot of studies from all over the world, empirical studies on semantic and pragmatic analysis of news headlines at different levels have been conducted by scholars. For example, we have Molek, Kwasakwa, 2014, Dongan Shao, and so on and so forth. We also have sentiment analysis by Bostan, Kim, and Klinger, 2019. We also have semantic analysis of news headlines by Chavan, 2018. These scholars have done a lot of work on newspaper use of headlines to call attention of the audience to certain entities of social reality. However, we noticed in literature that scholars have given just a kind of scanty attention to the combination of pragmatics and lexicosemantics to analyze health-related news headlines, especially in Nigeria, and pandemic, so to say. So we now say, okay, let us try to look at this gap to see how combination of pragmatics and lexicosemantics to cast headlines will now make a kind of influence on audience perception or understanding or behavior. So the essence of this study is to look at how headline casting by Nigerian newspapers will influence how the audience will behave when they are searching online to get news about COVID-19 in terms of their knowledge, in terms of what they prefer to use, and so on and so forth. Well, we have 3 research questions that we will set to answer. The first one is between coronavirus and COVID-19. What name do Nigerians prefer to call the new virus? 2, how does the media presentation of new virus in their headlines influence the name that Nigerians give to the virus? And third one, what are the pragmasemantic implications of lexical items in newspapers' headlines and their implications for information-seeking behavior of Nigerians? These are the 3 research questions that we set, and we try to provide answers to them. In literature, the time cannot permit me to do that now, but we capture some basic concepts. One of the concepts is headlines, construction, and implications for news interpretation by audience, meaning that the way the media construct headlines may determine how the news audience will understand and interpret the social reality that has been reported by the media. Another concept that we looked at in literature is news media and citizens' health behavior in health crisis. What we try to do here is to look at what literature has said about how the media condition the behavior of audience in times of health crisis. That when there's a pandemic or epidemic, how do people react to this health crisis? And this is connected to how the media report such health crisis. So the way the media report health crisis may determine whether the media will have a kind of panic or not when they are reacting to the crisis, whether they will have more knowledge of it or not. These are the concepts that we capture in literature. We use 2 theories to drive this study. The first one is Jacob May's pragmatic acts theory. It states that the meaning of any utterance or any speech act is always suggested in the context of the speech act. That is, when we want to give meanings to certain pronouncement utterances, it is the context of that utterances that will determine the meaning that we are going to give to it. That if the context is changed or the utterance is made in another context, the meaning given to that speech act will be different. Then this theory cannot take care of the scope of the study. That is why we now complement it with the information-seeking behavior theory, which says that people need to get answers to certain information, and they always approach communication infrastructure, that is the media in particular, that's available to them to get meanings from them. And the source always influences how the audience will interpret the information they get from such sources. So these are the 2 theories that we combine to drive the study. Methodology, we use mixed methods approach. We combine the descriptive survey and content analysis. Survey is when we try to look at people's opinion, perception, knowledge about something in a particular time. We did that one. Then content analysis is when the focus is on the content of the media, either print, recorded, audio, or visual. to analyze the content and bring out patterns from the content. So we use these two methods. Data were collected from different sources. Specifically, we categorize and aggregated headlines of COVID-19 related news stories from different Nigerian newspapers. Then we also have the real-time data from Google Trend. The search normalized tool from Google Trend was used to get this. And then we did an online survey for media audience through Google survey. Because that time we could not approach people because of COVID-19 pandemic, so we used online survey to get information from the people. Then we conducted intercoder reliability to carry out the use of the agreement criteria associated with cryptography alpha. That is what we used to conduct the intercoder reliability, to be sure that the instrument we used was valid and reliable, and we were able to establish that. Then we analyzed the data using different descriptive and inferential statistics to get meaning from the data we got. Then what are the results that we got from the findings? The first research question was talking about between coronavirus and COVID-19, how news audience see and use the virus. So the first finding is telling us that coronavirus, as one of the key terms, was found to be used most, 49.25% in the month of March, compared to other months in the news category of Google Trends. And this is available in Figure 1 as shown on the screen. We also discovered that the use of COVID-19 by audience accounted for more than 60% compared to the use of coronavirus, which was 49.25% in the same month of March, meaning that audience used COVID-19 more than they used coronavirus when they searched online to get information about the new virus. And over 58% of the participants also said that they saw the keywords, that is COVID-19, in the news headlines they read, meaning that the knowledge they got from the headlines also influenced what they searched when they go online. In summary of the first research question, that although Nigerian journalists use coronavirus more often than COVID-19 in the headline, audience employed COVID-19 more than they used coronavirus while searching information about the virus, meaning that there is no direct correlation between the use of coronavirus and COVID-19 and how the media audience search. Where the media use COVID-19 more, use coronavirus more, audience use COVID-19 more to search. Research question 2, we look at media presentation of COVID-19, the news headlines, and probably discriminant use of coronavirus or in the search for the virus online through the internet. So we found out that there's a kind of association between headline types that the audience search and then the one that they see in the newspaper. That is the type of headlines that the media used may determine how the audience will search that information. And for instance, it is established that COVID-19 as a kicker, because we have different types of headline. We have the flush headline, we have the cross line, we have the banner, we have the kicker. So we discovered that when COVID-19 as a kicker is used, it significantly contributed to audience information search interest about the virus. That is, anytime they use COVID-19 as kicker to make the audience to go and look for more information about the virus. One unit of coronavirus as kicker in the headline increased audience search interest by 99.9%. Not only that, findings also show that the newspapers deployed their headline resources for pragma-semantic purposes, that is to achieve certain pragma-semantic functions, such as to warn, to confirm, to assess, to educate, and to sensitize the audience. Those are the functions, the pragmatic functions they use the headlines to achieve. And when coronavirus was used as key term, audience understood the headlines within some pragma-semantic prism, such as confirming and warning.
Less than 20 seconds.
Hello?
You have less than 20 seconds.
Okay, let me quickly rush to findings. Yeah, the findings also show that audience demonstrated their understanding of COVID-19 within the pragma semantic scope, sensitizing, confirming, warning, and so on and so forth. So the result of our study align with the speech act theory and the information seeking theory that we have used to drive the study. What are the major inferences from our findings? We infer that through lexical choices by Nigerian journalists to construct socio, environmental, and political realities around COVID-19 pandemic, the news media have determined the topic of discourse and have conditioned the cognition of the media audience in Nigeria about the pandemic. Also, there is a kind of discrepancy in how the journalists and the audience use the two keywords. While Nigerians use coronavirus more, audience use COVID-19 to search. However, this apparent divergence in the use by audience and journalists does not mean that there is no correlation. The use of these two keywords also have some implications, some semantic implications for audience, such as warning, sensitizing, assessing, and educating. And these pragma semantic implications could equip the audience with some level of knowledge about the virus when they go online to search. And in conclusion, it is suggested that newspapers need to be consistent in using the keywords when they are reporting, and further studies on, should focus on stylo-pragmatic analysis of COVID-19. And finally, we suggest that investigation should be conducted to establish direct relationship between the style of constructing news stories about the pandemic and audience knowledge, belief, and attitudes. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, dear Professor. I want to thank Assistant Prof. Dr. Babatunde Ojebui for his study on behalf of our committee again. Our third speakers today, are Assistant Prof. Dr. Fatma Nazlı Köksal from İstanbul Aydın University, Communication Faculty and Research Assistant Hasan Doğan from Turkish Republic of Northern Cyprus, Eastern Mediterranean University with the title of Visual Semiology in Architectural Design. Yes, dear Professor.
Okay, thank you, Nurcan. By the way, can you see our presentation?
Yes, we can, Hocam.
Okay, today actually I will present, but Hasan Doğan from the Eastern Mediterranean University of the Northern part, Cyprus. My colleague is also here. Again, thank you. And today our presentation subject is about the visual semiology in architectural design. But at the beginning, we have to focus on that. We will not provide a schematic analysis about the semiology. In this presentation, we just want to focus on a general overview. What is the meaning of the semiology in architectural design? Because we consider the architecture as design, but as an art at the same time. And what are the critical points between the architectural design, semiotic, and communication? First of all, we would like to, hold a minute, please. We would like to start our presentation to mention about the meaning of city from the semiotic point of view. So a city can be seen an organism that lives in the process of historical and social development before and beyond being a holistic structure, formally arising from the need for collective presence. Like every place, a center of the population must have a center which communicates the universe. Therefore, city language forms based on the building the identity of a city. Besides military, religious, and public, the structures and the places which divide the civil habitats of the individuals are designed over submitting obligation. Therefore, architecture which gives meaning to different living spaces perceives different building representations which emerged as urban artifacts as body language. This aesthetic preference is nothing more than a grammatical rule that controls the language of the city beyond being an artistic style. However, the important point here is that the fact that the representation of the city depends on an image design, which means what the city is saying doesn't only want to be understood. This image at the same time turns into a sign to authority that instructs urban to look and to obey. Therefore, the spatial and temporal suitability of a city is automatically determined by the predispositions of social activities toward homogeneousness or heterogeneousness, which is related to how dominant cultural nuances are. The rationality and functionality, which are shaped based on daily lifestyles and myths, especially, transform into the notion of space according to the which city takes form. Hold a minute, please. Oops. Can you hear me?
Yes, hocam. Yes,
Hocam,
we can
I'm
hear you.
sorry, there is a problem
Yes,
on
we
my
can.
computer. Yeah, I'm sorry.
Okay.
So semiotics, sorry. Yes, I was here. Beyond being a shelter, therefore a city, beyond being a shelter, houses are such structures which obtain meaning shaped by the influence of culture, especially of the society's sociocultural structure. As time means chronos and the space means topos pattern, the house reflect the characteristic of a culture or ethnic group which they part of, while on the other hand, they reflect the image of the individual's essence as a communicative action. The effect of climate and typology, which are physical components of culture as well as social components of culture, such as value systems, beliefs, lifestyles, and habits, are cardinal factors in the formation of traditional houses. And in this respect, traditional structures, which are focused on in this study, are visual representation spaces that narrates their own story, like a verbal culture, because we mentioned about the visual cultural perspective about the traditional houses in this presentation, and they convey their unique codes, thought, visuality. And as a generally, when we mention about the focus of this study, actually we try to discuss the traditional architecture as a cultural text, visual cultural text, aimed to reveal traditional Urfa houses thought analytical reading within the context of visual semiology. Maybe in this point, I have to say that my colleague and co-author Hasan Doğan is also from Urfa. That's why we mention about the Urfa houses. We emphasize that. The samples selected within the scope of this study will be evaluated according to the context of the cultural and architectural design approach of Umberto Eco and Amos Rapoport. And here you can see, as I mentioned at the beginning of our presentation, we believe that a semiotic approach as a method for analyzing architectural design actually as a visual imagery doesn't always require necessarily the schematic structure. So we will try to give the general overview. I'm sorry for my pronunciation because I need to be quick because Nur Hocam is looking to me here. Architecture and semiology, according to the ECHO, architectural objects transmit nothing in sign, they're functional, because when we mention about the architecture as a design, generally we face this reality. It is a functional, not communicative. Of course, no one doubts that a glass makes drinking a liquid easily, as a roof is actually used to cover a place. This determination is direct, precise, and obviously making functionality something so comfortable and easy to grasp. But here, the first question is that, can functions be expanded in terms of communication? And the second question is that, does looking at functions in terms of communication help us better understand them and define their functions? And this is the point actually which makes architecture proactive in the field of semiotic, especially the visual semiology, because semiotics or semiology, which can also be described as a communication mechanism, not only examines the system which are clearly seen as to be sign system, but also treats all cultural phenomena actually as if they are indicator system and tries to reveal the meaning of the system. Here there were some detailed information which is related with the click points about the architecture and semiology. One more important thing here, the architectural code tools generates a visual password. And Eco mentioned by quoting the Barthes comes true from this point of view. As soon as the society is formed, every use becomes its own indicator. So one of the main areas of semiotic is to treat the cultural phenomena as communication process. And this doesn't mean that, this is the critical point, because this doesn't mean that all cultural phenomena are communicational process only. But all of them can be accepted according to the ECHO, of course. All of them can be accepted as communication processes and gained cultural functions, especially for being a part of communication process. Also in this study, our another reference point is Amos Rappaport, because Rappaport is also emphasized the relationship between the functionality in terms of semiology from the cultural side and architecture. And Rappaport highlighted that human behavior, including interaction and communication, is influenced by roles, context, and situations that in turn are frequently communicated by cues in the setting making up the environments. The relationship among these are learned as part of inculturation and acculturation. Here you can see the Rappaport built environment as a product of culture. And in this table, actually, he emphasized that culture, worldview, value, ideal image, norms, family structure, all of these are effective to build an environment. I mean, in terms of houses, especially for the traditional houses. And in this study specifically, we would like to talk about the Urfa, because Urfa houses, which an important place in the Anatolian traditional housing architecture, have been formed based on a design and the construction tradition that has lasted for centuries. This tradition was formed, this tradition was formed by shaping the way of life depending on the religion of Islam, the construction and decoration techniques of North Mesopotamia, with local construction equipment. And here you can see an example from the traditional Urfa houses. First of all, when we look to the material, the architectural material, stone as a material has been quite significant in forming Urfa houses. These houses reflects the construction techniques of the period, as well as the socioeconomic and cultural values of the inhabitants and their lifestyles. That's why see another example from the Urfa houses. There were some rooms, kitchens, I mean events, but by the way, in this presentation, we will also focus on just a few parts of the houses. And also Urfa houses have been constructed as separate for men and women. This is the first thing. This is the first and dominant cultural aspect of these houses, because do not have window on the street view, and they are sided with the high walls. This situation enabled to build the houses organized, resembling the place. And the section where the women live is more equipped and big compared to place where the men live in the house where household is. Here you can see the male territory means selamlık, we call it. It is ornamentation and symbol on the internal facade of selamlık, which represent the prestige of the family. I mean, if it is bigger, it means that this family has a prestige on the society, I mean, on the perception of the society. And this is the female territory, the introverted part of the house. There is no ornamentation on internal facade. It is the modest part of the house. This is really important in order to control the privacy. There is less view toward the outside. At some houses, these sections are passed through separate doors from the street side, and the first to the men's section and then to the women's section with 2 doors. The women's section, which forms the house's actual part where the family lives, has more area than the men's section. And the women's section includes service places such as kitchen, barn, toilet. And the men's section is the section where the male guests are hosted. And also it has some another parts. The harem section appears as a place where family economy is managed and privacy. I mean, this is the connotational meaning of that. Harem and selam.
Less than 30 seconds.
30 seconds? Oh, I need to be quick, okay. I'm so sorry. I'm passing the courtyard because another important thing is the even in the traditional Urfa houses, because here you can see the place. I mean, even it is like the main determining factor in terms of the architecture is the even. It is a symmetrical plan motif with the room one or both sides, and maintains its original form by isolating itself from other places. I'm just pausing it, and I would like to show something about the doors as well, because there were some images or some mythical things which represent the Islam, for instance. I mean, I hope that you will read my all of comments in the full text. But as a conclusion, okay, Barth states that not only urban space, but human space in general has always had a meaning. And the place where human lives creates a real discourse with its symmetry, reflections, place contracts, and paradigms. And in this study, traditional Urfa houses are made meaningful within the frame of the semiotics. In architectural semiotics, it is seen geometric shapes and patterns in a certain architectural structure emerge not as a passive product, but as a real space made possible by the subject who will use or who this work. As in every stage, as a conclusion, last conclusion, a human life and behavior, all applications of human in the use of space in architecture are gathered in a certain theoretical framework. So a conscious person and the world emerged in which he or she could better comprehend a natural and social universe. Thank you for your listening. Actually, this is the end. It was very quick presentation for me.
Thank you, Hocam. Thank you, dear Professor. Questions will be asked again at the end of the session. Okay, now we have another presentation. That's my presentation with my student. We have a presentation on legitimization of gender based on violence through media with my lovely student Asena. Before starting our presentation, I want to thank her here on behalf of everybody that she has a belief of herself and a nice understanding of human rights, and she will be a good academician one day, I hope. Our topic is about how gender-based violence is legitimized through media. Media, which has gradually become an essential part of people's daily lives and their relationships consciously or unconsciously, assumes a function of shaping the mindset about the perception of women and women's rights positively or negatively. And it has become an extremely important tool as today's people use it to follow social, political, and economic developments. Media has such a power due to its structure and can sometimes use individuals' concern about security to increase view, read, click, etc. Although individuals living in the society are not the direct victims of any crimes, they indirectly suffer from the violence news published or broadcasted on media. Thus, the fact that media shows violence news is an intense manner containing high dose of violence for more views might cause negative impacts on the audience or the readers. Mass media has been gaining a more importance in people's lives. The individual who tries to follow the development around through mass media are affected by the language and tone used in the news presented through these tools. Studies examining how male and female genders are represented in mass media have revealed that the images in these tools contain sexist judgments. Gender discrimination contains stereotypes developed based on female and male genders and expresses discrimination against the female sex. The general definition of violence will be made in the first session of our study, violence against women, the concept of violence, and the definitions of this concept included in news and their use within the framework of language will be explained, and domestic violence and the forms of domestic violence reflected to the outside world will be examined. Furthermore, the way the case of violence against women and the domestic violence are addressed in new media and mainstream news, their scope and targets, underlying messages will be addressed briefly, and recommendations about what must be done to prevent violence will be provided. Our study includes femicides addressed in mainstream media and mentioned in social media platforms where social media journalism is made with personal posts. Since 2009, and the use of the language preferred in the expression of these murders using the discourse analysis method to 2021. Additionally, the change in the selection of language used in mainstream media in time and the effects of such languages on living behavior and understanding styles are discussed. Now I want to give the floor to Asena Tunalı. She's going to present our study. Yes, Asena, the word is yours.
Thank you, Professor. Upon Professor Koch's speech, I would like to continue with the violence part of the study, which will be briefly mentioned in the presentation due to time restrictions. So violence could be categorized into physical, sexual, psychological, economic, and verbal coercion or force directed to a person or a group. The power mechanisms one has on another person, including family dynamics, is in the definition of violence. And violence against women mostly manifests itself in the form of domestic violence. It is a human rights violation which has no valid solution to this day. Policies on preventing and penalizing the issue were mainly adopted in the 20th century, although rates continue to increase all throughout the world. Elaborating on domestic violence, family refers to an ideal community formed by the society, but the idealized image helps covering up the unpleasant facts, such as domestic violence, to maintain the institution. By society, male is assigned an ownership of all control mechanisms, such as protecting or leading, but female figure is responsible for creating and sustaining a sacred home, both as a physical and a symbolic entity, which encloses them in an environment which is controlled by the male figure. And the domestic violence could not be separated from society and is based on the secondary position of women and the patriarchal family structure that supports the idea of family matters should stay hidden. Types of domestic violence could be categorized in the 5, that is physical, sexual, psychological, economic, and verbal, as you can see the basic examples of each category. Moving on with the principles of journalism published by Trade Journalists Association in Turkey. If these principles were followed, such as not exposing private lives, distributing unverified information, or embedding ideological preferences behind objectivity, the media should not have the violence legitimizing role, as you will see in the case study. First, in Münevver Karabulut's case, the reports quickly emphasize on Karabulut and her murderer Cem Garipoğlu's relationship by utilizing the pictures of two, and the case was enclosed in a two-party love story ended with a murder, which resulted in the formation of a presupposition whether if it was about jealousy or cheating or something else. Also, media utilize sexist Turkish idioms that objectifies the victim as a bird, as a rose, or anything that should be protected, but it is failed. Therefore, they disregarded her identity as a woman and the individual that she is. In Ayşe Paşalı's case, reports emphasize on her role as a mother and completely ignored her individuality and utilized her motherhood in the dramatization of the case. Almost every report referred the murderer, İstikbal Yetkin, as her ex-husband or even referred her as her current husband, but later they quickly acknowledged the fact that they were divorced. So marriage used as a sensationalizing element provided a private family matter that public could not fully know about, ground for this presupposition. Further, reports based on murder statements suggested that the murderer was still in love with Paşalı and he deeply regretted the murder. In Özgecan's case, the murderer's statement blaming the victim for making him angry was used as a basis for the reports. Unnecessary information was included in the narrative, even to the extent that they made references to a Turkish TV series about 4 men sexually assaulting a girl and forced marriage, and the murder watched prior to murder, which was a subject of mockery in Turkish society for some unknown reason, as if sexual assault was a joke in itself. Overall, her murder was turned into a tragic spectacle for masses to consume, and the case, as well as the importance of her individuality, was trivialized by making references to a mocked TV series. In Şule Chet's case, reports focused on a suicide from the get-go, which was alleged by the murderers, and the investigation was still not completed at the moment. Alleged suicidal behavior was supported by the media by the use of illnesses and deaths in Şule Chet's family and her poverty. They quickly separated the victim and the murderers by differentiating in terms of social status as a university student working to provide for herself, and 2 rich businessmen who allegedly had nothing to do with her. Also, CCTV footage of the young girl entering the plaza with 2 men smiling and information about alcohol consumption effectively marginalized the victim for Turkish audience. In Emine Bulu's case, media quickly identified the parties as an ex-husband and ex-wife, and murder's allegations about the victim distributed quickly. Her murder turned the event into a man still in love with the woman, hearing about woman's plan on marrying again, and got jealous, or he could not control himself upon insults to his masculinity. So media formed a concrete family taboo and a masculinity that should not be threatened around the case, and enabled a toxic discourse which suggests if you get married with a man once, we cannot mention you without mentioning that marriage anymore. Similar to Şule Chet, Pınar Gültekin, reports about Pınar Gültekin secluded the murderer from the victim by establishing a status division between parties and enclosing him in a marriage and assigning a homewrecker role to Pınar Gültekin, even though she broke up with him prior to murder. Cemal Avcı's accusation about blackmailing, which he failed to prove to authorities, and his accusations about Pınar sexually assaulting him was reported without any verification or evidence. Every accusation made by the murderer was distributed in the media, and some reports did not even mention about them as allegations or accusations as they are. Lastly, in Aylin Sözerk's case, similar with almost every example in the study, reports were formed around the murder's narrative, such as an affair, even though they were denied many times by the ones who are close to Sözer. Emphasis made by reports on her identity as an academician and references to the murderer's lower social status resulted in victim-blaming discourse, which evolved around the idea of her unfortunate life choices. Her identity as an individual and a woman was generalized by the media and the authorities and was classified into a loss of educational community, not a loss of whole society. This type of generalization usually made by the media to disregard striking violence against women rates. So in conclusion, this study determined the content of the violence against women with the help of the concept of violence and explained the meanings attributed to the violence against women. Physical, sexual, psychological, economic, and verbal violence against women were examined under separate headings. This study showed that the language used in the news about violence against women in mainstream and the social media does not respect gender equality and is prepared in a sexist style, violating the most basic human rights of women. And media actively marginalized women by drawing out relationships and probable causes for murder by including murderous remarks and allegations in their reports without any solid evidence, which should be avoided in order to prevent a victim-blaming discourse in the society. And they did not respect the private lives of the victims and included every single aspect of their lives to marginalize women in accordance with the Turkish society's expectations from women. In order to...
Less than 20 minutes, Asena? 20 seconds, sorry.
Okay. In order to move further as a society and to prevent legitimization of violence against women, media should change the sexist language used in the news and stop prioritizing the femicide cases by women's level of education or violence level of the event, whether the victim was married, divorced, or consumed alcohol or something else. And effective disincentives for targeting, blaming, shaming, or marginalizing the victims should be created. Subliminal messages or ideologically driven discourses given through news should be eliminated by media before even being published. Not only by media, but also through schools from kindergarten to universities. The patriarchal state of mind should be changed. Considering the fact that media is a mere starting point for the legitimization of violence, families and the social structure driven and shaped by ideologies should also change from their core to prevent such human rights violations.
Okay.
Thank you for listening.
Thank you for your presentation. Okay. Now our presentations are finished. Thanks again to Asena. Yes, question will be asked in the end of the session, you know. Are there any questions? Thank you, Begüm Hocam. Are there any questions to our panelists from the attendees? Are there any questions? Panelist to panelist can be also any questions. I have a question, for example. I have a question to Babatunde, their assistant prof doctor. Are you here, dear professor?
Yes, thank you.
No question. I want to ask, you listen to our newspapers, for example, newspapers, you talk about COVID, but do you know the differences and the similarities between the Turkish newspapers and your type of newspapers? For example, I found a lot of similarities between how we look on COVID. Did you analyze when you are in here, when you're going to have a presentation in here, did you have any opportunity to look at the news in Turkey, that we have the same kind of similar newspaper articles or similar things to write about COVID?
Okay, thank you very much. I'm glad to know that there's a similarity between our Nigerian newspapers and Turkish newspapers report COVID-19. However, our study did not focus on comparison. It is not a comparative study. If it is comparative, we'll have maybe with Turkey or other countries based on certain reasons for that. But majorly, we focused on Nigerian newspapers, and we selected some newspapers as representative of Nigerian newspapers. So we didn't focus on Turkish and Nigeria. It's only Nigeria. It's not a comparative study.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions to any other panelist?
I would also like to ask a question to
Yes,
Baba and all then to you, dear chair. Nice to meet you, Babatunde. In your presentation, you covered the Nigerian newspapers, so I don't have any idea about the media profile in Nigeria. So how can you define the freedom of the media? Is it free? Are there any regulatory institutions, or is there a heavy censorship? So how would you say, as a summary, how do you find your media? Thank you.
Okay, in Nigeria, we have online media, we have offline media, and their contents are always available on the media, on the internet. So any content that you need, you go online, they are there, and you can access them. There's no censorship about what you can use, what you can access in the content of Nigerian newspapers. As long as you are using them for academic purposes, there is no restriction. So we had free access to the content of news media that we analyzed. There's no censorship, there was no restriction. We had free access. I hope I answered the question.
Thank you. Yes.
Thank you.
I also asked about the political side of the issue, but yes, I learned. Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Also, dear Dr. Koç, also your presentation and the topic that you and your student addressed, it's a very important issue. I want to thank you again. I would like to ask you about the methodology, because I also used the critical discourse analysis for my PhD thesis. I think there are some approaches like Root-Wodak, Van Dyke, or Fairclough. So which of did you choose for analyzing? Can you tell me some about your methodology, dear Koç?
Thank you, dear professor. The methodology is used with Van Dyke, but I think Asena can also talk about more because the research part is hers. She can talk about it more, but we use Van Dyke's discourse analysis part. Yes,
Thank
Asena.
you.
Do you have any words to say?
I generally focused on content analysis method for the research part of the study, and I mainly searched through the headlines and the main text about the cases and the reports, and I focused on the discourse they help to establish, and they help and support to form around the expectations from women in Turkey. So I analyzed the overall reports with the content analysis method.
We want to talk about the language that is to be changed. That's important for us because the most important thing is for all the newspapers, for all the media, I think, the language of the patriarchal society should be changed into an equal one so that every part is going to be in a coherent way. When we have these kind of news, what is the news and what it should be done to change this patriarchal analysis to be changed into a normal based one so that everybody can understand it in a way of non-gender based. So we took all the news from this within perspective.
Thank you very much.
Yes, any other questions to our panelists from our attendees? Any questions? Okay, so if there is no questions, then thanks for your contributions to our Congress. Now I want to show you our certificates, but before the certificates, all the cameras are open. Can I take a photo of everybody? Maybe with the certificates also. Maybe after the certificates, okay. I want to show you the certificates, okay. Again, thank you for your participations.
You emailed this to us, right?
Yes, we're going to email them, of course.
Also, the panel would last until 3 o'clock. So aren't there any questions in the chat box? Because we made a very quick presentation, but
Yeah,
there's a missing speaker here.
There is also one more presentation, but he's not here, so it's up to 3 o'clock. It's not to 3 o'clock, but up to 3 o'clock. There was one more presentation, but he's not in here. He's not available. So thanks again for your presentations. If there are any questions, we can take them, of course. But
actually, I asked Babutende, but I would like to learn if government exercises censorship on the media. So not about the academics reach, if they can reach the online media resources, but is there any government pressure upon media? Is the media free? What I was asking.
Yeah. Well, we have some institutions that monitor the media, what they do in terms of content, in terms of what they cover, in terms of whether they follow the ethics. We have regulatory bodies. But if I want to talk in terms of media freedom, Nigeria has more media freedom compared to other countries where they have maybe dictatorship or something. But in Nigeria, is democracy. The media is free. They have the opportunity of criticizing the government. However, in some cases, when they seem to go or to cross the red line, the regulatory body can come and do some sanctions. They sanction some of them. But to a large extent, the media is free in Nigeria, but they are not reckless. They are controlled by government in terms of what they give to the audience. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you again.
Thank you. I don't have other questions.
Okay.
Because
Any other questions?
What again? Did you get my answer?
thank you.
I'm just asking for the
Yes,
question.
it was a great answer. Thank you. I
Okay.
got my answer.
Okay.
Thanks.
Okay. Thank you. Any other question for me? No? Okay.
No,
Thank you.
thanks. They just say it's a great session. That's it. Thank you for your contribution again. Okay. Can I take the photo again? Sorry. Maybe there is going to be another question. No, there's no question. Thank you. Thank you for your contribution. Have a nice day.
Thank you very much.
Yeah,
Have
I
a
would like
happy
to thank
day.
you, all of you as well.
Thank you.